From Boston, Crockett's Victory Garden.
Welcome to Crockett's Victory Garden. I'm Jim Crockett, and as I promised you last week, I would be out here in a suburban garden talking about a number of things. For example, today I'm going to patch a piece of lawn that we planted last September, but unfortunately early this spring a truck ran over it, and we'll show you just how to fix that kind of a situation. We're going to plant some strawberry plants and some raspberries and some blueberries, and we're also going to prune an ancient grapevine. But I want, before we do even any of those things, I want you to look right down this perennial border, which is many, many years old, and last fall we started to rejuvenate it. And right down at this very, very front, you can see what's happening. Some of the dwarf tulips that we put out in October are now just beginning to come into blossom. Beneath them, the bulbs are planted beneath these other plants, which are called Sweet William. Now these Sweet William plants are biennials, which will blossom in June this year, which we planted the seed of last July, blossom this year. Then last fall we also planted a peony, a big pink peony out where you see this stake, and I noticed the first of those buds are beginning to come out of the ground. This is one of the thrills of the perennial garden, is to how quickly they come out of the ground in the spring, how they survive the worst kinds of winter. It can really give you a promise of the new year. Well, in this garden today, there's 2 or 3 things I want to add to it. And the first thing that I want to say is that I have gone along ahead of time and prepared the soil, and I've added bone meal to the soil because this has a lot of phosphorus in it, and that's what makes flowers and good root growth. Well, in this particular area, I'm going to plant some lilies. One called Pink Perfection, and a white one called Regal. Now this Regal is a species lily. Both of these lilies these bulbs happen to come from Holland. I'm going to plant them about 6 or 8 inches deep, and I'll show you exactly how we do it. I want to plant them in a clump because these will blossom in July or August simultaneously. You see how the lily bulb itself comes. Some of these, you always want to be sure that these roots are moist, not dried out. These are living roots. Get these bulbs down about 6 or 8 inches deep, and a spade is just about as easy way as I know to get them down there underground. And we're going to plant a clump of 3. Now this is one of the old rules of gardening, that these odd numbers seem to give a sort of a more pleasant sensation to the eye. Now I'm going to plant this Regal, which will blossom at the same time, the Regal lily, yes, right down here. Even the bud is beginning to show on that one, right down in the ground here. The white and the pink together will make a lovely combination. One more lily right down in here. One of the nice things about these lilies is once you've planted them, they're there forever. They'll be there for many, many years to come, coming up every year, blossoming, multiplying. I'll stick a couple of stakes in here because I don't want to forget that I have lilies planted in that spot. Once they're out of the ground, they can take care of themselves. Now down in here, show you some next plants I'm going to put in. These are foxgloves, biennials, which will have long spikes of slipper-shaped flowers along in June. They were planted also a year ago. We brought these in from our Victory Garden location. Nice root system. Put them in like so. Again, in a clump of 3. Rather, a 1.5 apart, a foot apart. It's just about right. Move some of the soil. This is Phlox coming in around it. One more in here. See what a wonderful root system you get from a plant such as this. It just never will know that it has been moved at all. Give that a drink of water, and it's off and growing. Now, one of the things you may have watched last summer was the planting of the rooting of some cuttings of that lovely phlox, that tall growing phlox called Miss Lingard. And this is what they look like now. Look at that root system. This is from a cutting taken last summer. And that Miss Lingard will come up here about 2 feet tall, last for years, and just fill this full of white flowers over a period of a couple of months in the summertime. Now that's a perennial. That'll live for years and years and years. Next to it, we're coming down here, we'll put in some Canterbury bells. These 3 plants will give us lovely spikes of blue, pink, or white bell-shaped flowers this summer. But let's go down to the other end of this garden, this lawn area, where the truck ran over it, and see if we can repair it. Well, some more of our early tulips coming up, and the yew made it through the winter. But this is our problem area. This is where a truck got stuck early this spring and just ripped through the netting and made a deep gash in the lawn. Well, you might think that the thing to do would be just to fill this in and put in grass seed. But if you do, you're going to have that same old problem of planting grass seed in the spring. You get a lot of weeds and a lot of crabgrass. So what I'm going to do first of all is just to salvage some of this grass which got just pushed down by the truck. And you see, I'm able to get a nice little crop of it right there. And I get a little bit more from the bottom. The wheel apparently was spinning in this stuff. Now most of the rest of this is not worth salvaging. So what we'll do now is to fill in that hole with this same soil and peat moss mixture that we had when we built the lawn up originally last September. Fill that up just about pretty close to being even to the soil surface. Now we might say we're going to start a little manicure job here. I'll use my trowel and we'll just start the various kind of a re-sodding job using our very same seedlings that we had. Then we went up on the other end of the garden where it wouldn't show up by the lawn. We dug up a few more of these pieces, and we're going to patch this with something which absolutely will not show because the grass came out of the same seed package. Again, here's another nice little piece we'll put in here. Well, we'll just go on and cover the rest of this. Now we have to go and do our strawberries, and this is the time for it. What you're looking at are some strawberries that were planted last year, and they're going to be bearing this summer. But now we figure that a strawberry bed is good for about 2 years, sometimes 3. It's always a good idea to start a new bed going. I want to talk to you first about the strawberry plants that you should buy. There are many, many varieties to choose from, but when they come to you, they really don't look all that auspicious. Nevertheless, buy what are called certified plants, which are disease-free, because once you get disease in your soil from strawberries, you've really had it, and you've got to move your bed to another part of the garden. Well, the strange kind of a tool that I'm using to plant a strawberry is not a trowel, as you might think, because you see these strawberries have rather long roots. I want the roots to go down into the ground, so I'm using a spade, and I'm using just an ordinary shingle, because I want that spade to be very clean when it goes into the ground. I'm setting these plants 18 inches apart. Push the spade in like this, push it over like so, spread those roots out in a fan like so, and get them right down into the ground. And the depth is now the important thing. Roots down straight, pull the soil around so that that crown is, you might say, half in and half out of the ground. If you put them in too deeply, they'll smother. If you put them in too shallowly, they'll dry out. Okay? It's a rather heavy soil, and I don't want that spade to stick. Just push it right down, push it away, and you have a beautiful, clean spot for it to go in. Fan out the roots. Fan them out. Remove your spade like so. The roots will lie against that surface and get it just partly in and partly out of the soil. Now, plants will spread out here in all directions. We'll have a wide bed of plants here for next summer. This will be a year from now before we'll be picking them. Set your plants 18 inches to 2 feet apart. You see, we're getting a little bit of mud stuck on that spade again, which I don't, it only complicates things. I'm putting these in 18 inches apart. We'll allow those plants to spread in here and fill in what is called the matted row system. This soil, of course, has had all of its nutrients and such put in here ahead of time. All of the organic matter and nutrients. Well, this is how we plant strawberries. And the next thing on our list is raspberries. We're going to plant them right over here. You're looking at a raspberry plant which is just about a year old. This plant was set in when it was 6 inches tall just 1 year ago, and I want you to see what's been happening in here. First thing I always do when I handle raspberries is put on some gloves, because they do have the thorns all along the stems. Now, this is a variety called Hilton. It was all of 6 inches tall when it was put in last year. It's about 3 feet tall, which is a little unusual for a raspberry. This is rather a dwarf growing variety. Nevertheless, these buds that you see now just opening will produce flowers, and in June, late June and July, this will have, each one of these plants will bear, I would say those 3 canes will have at least a full cup of some of the most delicious raspberries that you could imagine. Well, now, the raspberry plant spreads underground. And if you look right down in here, you'll see one of the suckers, so-called, which apparently is coming from this plant underground. Now, if you have this type of a thing in your garden and you have healthy plants, these kinds of suckers can be lifted and planted elsewhere in your garden. Now, one thing I want to say about this particular one is, if you want to help to keep down the weeds in your raspberries, mulch around them with a bark mulch like that. And that will keep the weeds down. All those suckers will come right on through it. But I said we're going to plant some new ones. And back here, I'll show you just how they arrive from the nursery. I have these in water, as you can see. This is to keep those roots wet, because if they ever dry out, they die. The variety I'm putting in here today is one called Newburgh. Be sure when you buy plants that you buy them that are certified as being disease-free. This root system is rather shallow. You don't need deep holes, and this is just exactly how you go about planting them. This is a typical plant. You can see a new shoot coming right down here from the base. So you don't need a great big deep hole as though you're planting an elm tree. There's something about like that. Spread those roots out a little bit and cover them not over, I would say, 3 inches deep. Step on them like so, and that plant is all set to go. Now let's put another one in, a spacing of roughly 2.5 feet, because they will grow very, very fast. Now soon fill this in. We'll have a solid row of raspberry plants along in here. This variety is Newburgh. This is a June-bearing one. Beautiful large fruit. We're going to put in another one called Sunrise, and then another one called August Red, which is a late one for ever-bearing. I think that's enough on raspberries, but earlier today we planted some blueberries. One of the pleasant discoveries when my friend brought this property was that there were 4 old blueberry bushes growing right along here, plants which are many, many years old. Last summer, covered these over with netting and harvested about 25 quarts of blueberries. Well, if they have been able to grow here without any culture than just what nature gave them, we know it's a pretty good site for blueberries. But all of these berries happen to be mid-season ones. So today we're going to plant some other varieties, spacing holes about 8 feet apart. We'll get in we dug holes 30 inches across, about so deep, and we're going to fill them full with a mixture of half of the original soil and half peat moss. And I have in here a mixture which we've put together of the peat moss and the soil. Now this is the regular sphagnum peat moss. Now many blueberries grow in swampy areas where this is their normal culture. This is apparently acid soil, just exactly like what they want. Now the easiest thing to do, about the easiest plant to grow is a blueberry. Rarely needs any pruning, any spraying. The plant that I have here, and you notice I have those roots in water because we cannot allow them to dry out. This is a variety called Early Blue. Now this one will come in maybe almost 2 months ahead of the latest variety, so there'll be a long spread. Now you can see where this is going. We've dug this out. There's not enough soil and peat moss in there at this time to take care of it. Might as well fill this hole up a little bit closer. Maybe move the card a little bit closer will help. The one thing that you must remember in growing blueberries is that the roots themselves must be rather close to the surface of the ground. Don't ever plant a blueberry any deeper than what it was growing in the nursery. The roots are fine and hair-like. We'll spread them out here about the best we can. Give them a light covering like this to begin with. Now you notice that is not planted deeply. I guess that's probably if I have a secret to tell you on blueberries, that would be it. Filling in this marvelous mixture of the normal soil that these plants are thriving in and peat moss. Now if you're not lucky enough to have this kind of soil, you want to remember that blueberries must have an acid soil. Well, this acid peat moss will help it a lot, but you may have to use iron chelate or a fertilizer, let's say, that is designed for such acid-loving plants as camellias and azaleas and gardenias and blueberries. And all I do is I like to use my feet in gardening right up against that and make, what I'm going to do now is to make a little sort of a depression here. We will give this plant a drink of water. Make sure that it stays moist. No pruning is necessary yet on a plant of this size. It's about 18 inches tall. Good sized plant. Finally, we'll fill this up a little bit and we'll give it a mulch. And the mulch that I want to do is just bark mulch like this. This will keep the weeds away, and that's all there is to planting a blueberry bush. Very simple and very sweet. You'll love them. I get a lot of questions about old grapevines and how to rejuvenate them, and I'd like to start as a demonstration to show you this ancient Concord grapevine, which 1 year ago climbed clear to the top of this pear tree that you see over here. It must be 30 or 40 feet in the air. The pergola upon which it was growing had collapsed and the whole thing was on the ground. So we just went in out of desperation and cut the plant back. And of course you can't kill a grapevine. You get this enormous amount of new growth. But we are now left with sort of a Gordian knot. What in the world to do with something? Now, when eventually I'd like to get rid of these old canes because they're not very productive. It's the young growth which is going to produce the grapes. By the way, this is a great stuff to leave on the ground for the birds to make their nests of. Now, what I'm going to do here, first of all, since there are two vines, I have separated the ones which are attached to this vine, pull them this way as though we're sort of parting the hair, you may say, and all of the other ones will go this other way. We're going to train them to go up over the arbor. Now, first thing that I like to do is just get rid of superfluous and dead wood. So we'll move in here and find, well, let's take a snag like this. This snag we know is dead. Just get some of this old tough wood. This one is just something dead. There's another dead one. When you're looking for the difference between dead and live, remember that the live wood, the most important wood to you to produce grapes, is this light brown wood. Now, in amongst all of these grapevines, you're apt to find some dead wood, which is gray in color. Just get rid of all of that so that you don't end up trying to make grapes grow on something which is already dead. While I'm talking about grapes, I know that this program is being seen all across the country, and in other parts of the country, we grow different kinds of grapes and treat them differently. This is a grape which, of course, can be used to make wine, but it is not one of the California type of grapes which are not pruned in this manner whatsoever. On in the south, we have the muscatine grape, which also can be trained on an arbor. Now let's look here for a typical piece of grape that we know will bear fruit. Now, along on this new growth, there are buds about every 6 or 7 inches along. If you want to get a good crop of grapes this year, cut off all but 2 buds. Now that may seem pretty drastic. All but 2 buds. And we'll find on this one, just leave 2. This little demonstration here, this will have several clumps of grapes, and beautiful grapes. This is that dark blue Concord that's so sweet that it's a real melt-in-your-mouth favorite. It's been around for 100 years, and I have a kind of a sneaking suspicion that this old vine was one right from the originator of this whole affair, Ephraim Bull from Concord. Now, what we're going to do is to find strong canes, and this is one of them right up in here, not too big. You can see it's roughly a 1/2 inch in diameter. That one will throw good young canes, which will have over the top of the pergola, so that in the summertime, when these things start to get ripe, be able to walk right up in between here and harvest grapes really by the bushel. Absolutely marvelous thing. This is not a long demonstration, but if you remember to cut the new growth, which is brown in color, light brown, back to 2 buds, and get rid of the dead wood, you at least are on the track, and you can follow it up from there, and you will get a good crop of grapes. One last thing I should tell you about grapes: do the pruning as early in the year as you can, because grapevines, like maple trees, bleed when they're cut in the spring. I have pruned them so late in the season that the new buds were actually 1 inch long. They do a little bleeding, they get over it, doesn't seem to hurt them a bit, so don't be at the least bit concerned if that is exactly what does happen. So I think this is about all we need to do on the grapes, just to show you that this is a big tangle. It's going to take hours and hours for me to do this. You spend a whole Saturday afternoon doing it, but right now I'd like to answer a couple of questions for you and see what we have, because we've been getting them from all across the country. Well, here's this first one from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Last year I mulched my potatoes with straw, but the field mice got to them before I did. Well, I tell you, it wasn't just the field mice, the slugs got to mine too when I mulched mine with straw. What can I do to keep this from happening again? Well, I'm going to go back to the way that all farmers grow their potatoes. This is the way I've grown them for years, in the ground. Plant them about 4 or 5 inches deep, and you'll get a nice crop of potatoes, and there won't be any mice or slugs on them. and I think that you'll be very pleased. Here's a letter from Alexandria, Virginia. Can the soil from discarded houseplants be used to repot new plants? Well, you might think it would be a pretty good idea, but actually that soil could be diseased, and it certainly has had all of its nutrients used up. That's probably why the plant went to pieces in the first place. So when I get rid of an old pot plant, that soil just goes on my compost pile, becomes part of the grist of the mill, which will eventually end up in the garden again. From Kansas City, can you suggest a good soil mixture for cacti? Yes, I can, a very simple one. If you can't buy from your garden center a cactus soil mixture, buy ordinary potting soil and mix it 50-50 with some good coarse sand. Now this is for a desert type cactus. Remember that there are other cacti that like to be out that come from the jungle, but this is for desert type cacti. From Haddon Heights, New Jersey, can you tell me how to propagate that beautiful false Aurelia? Yes, only from seeds, which you can buy, or you can buy the young plants. Well, next week we're going to be back right in Boston at the site of our original real Crockett's Victory Garden, and at that time I'm going to put in a new perennial bed. I hope you enjoy the program every week. I'm Jim Crockett.